Welcome back to the New School Leader, where we are committed to helping new and aspiring assistant principals develop the skills that they need to take the next step in their leadership journey. Thank you so much for joining us again today. My name is Luke Croy.
I'm Brad Phipps.
And in today's video, we're going to give you 4 tips for navigating those really difficult conversations. Let's go ahead and get started.
Before we jump into those tips, I think we have to define just why we're here. Why are we in those conversations that seem so difficult? The basics are behavior has to change.
Right.
Something has to change with the people you're dealing with and the teachers that you're leading. Those behaviors could include just a lack of timeliness, right? There's nothing I hate worse than someone being late. It's a big pet peeve of mine. It's a big pet peeve of most of ours, but that's something that might be a problem. Another problem might be lack of professional communication. They don't email very well. They don't speak very well on the phone. They don't talk to kids very well. Any number of those professional communications that they have to do daily. And then finally, not meeting the standard set instructionally for the campus. I think that's a biggie. One to add in, though, is withdrawal. Those teachers that you see that are on fire at the beginning of the year and mid-year, there's something that goes on either personally or professionally that puts them on the back burner.
So one other thing we need to talk about before we kind of get into these tips is let's just identify some reasons why these conversations are so difficult in the first place. I know one of the biggest things, and it's something that I struggle with, and it's a good thing, is that we all think that everybody comes from a place of positive intent. We all think that everybody in education wants to be the best version of themselves, which they do.
Yeah, most certainly. Most of them do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that makes it really, really tough, especially when you're having to give feedback that's not so great, right? Because you know the amount of work that they put into it, and you know the pride that they take in their work, and that can be really difficult. The other thing is that teaching is just so personal, right? I mean, we work our tails off, and we take a lot of pride in putting out something great for our students and creating great opportunities for our students and learning experiences for our students. And it's super personal, and we know how personal it is. So we get really concerned that when I've got to give somebody feedback that's not so great, that they're going to take it personal and we're going to hurt their feelings. And that's really tough because it happens.
It's a dagger, right? It's a dagger.
Yeah, it's really tough. The other part is, and it may sound silly, but we all want to be liked. And I think especially for new administrators, it's really, really tough when people don't like you. And I don't think any of us ever want to go into our job thinking today, I'm going to make folks not like me. Like that's not what I'm talking about here. But there are going to be times where people get frustrated with you, and that can be really, really hard for, I'm a people pleaser. I know Brett's a people pleaser, and that makes those conversations super difficult because I love to be liked.
Sure.
I love to have a good time. I always I got in trouble in school because I was the class clown.
Really?
And I know you didn't see that coming.
I didn't. No.
Yeah. So when people get frustrated with me or upset with me, it's really hard for me.
Yeah.
It's difficult. So the other thing, and this is really big, is I think that we're afraid, kind of along those same lines, we're really afraid to damage the relationship. This can be much more difficult if you are now a new administrator on the campus where you were teaching last year. My first assistant principal role, I left the classroom and went into administration in the same building, also supervising the same teachers that I was on a team with a year earlier.
Right.
That was super difficult, and it was tough for me to navigate just in trying to understand how to have these conversations without damaging the relationship that I had built in the year prior to that. But the other part of that is that you've got to redefine what that relationship is too.
Sure.
It's not going to be the same for a number of reasons, and that's probably for another show. But I think that those are kind of 4 things that we need to identify really quickly that make these conversations hard.
It's something you talk about all the time, the dichotomy of leadership, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You want to be liked, you want to build relationships, but you have to get people in the right spots.
Yeah, our job is to improve student achievement.
Right.
And a big part of that is improving instruction, and it can be really, really tough at times. And that brings us to today's question of the day, which is, why do you think those conversations can be so difficult to have? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say, and maybe we can, talk in the comments down below and try to come up with some ways to overcome maybe some of those problems or some of those concerns. Tip number 1, is, and we've talked about it before, but to use the phrase that Kim Scott uses, is we've got to care deeply and challenge directly. And so I'm gonna link up in the description a link to her book, Radical Candor. And I'm also gonna put a link in the description for a keynote video that she did that'll really help you get familiar with her work. It's about 30 minutes long, I think. I've used it, I've shown it to some other leadership groups before in trying to help them have some of these kind of feedback conversations. In her book, and I think even in the video, she talks about a time where she had to fire one of her employees. And she tells the story of, and I don't remember his name, but she tells the story of, let's call him Tom, right? And she says that Tom was doing a lot of things that kind of rubbed the team the wrong way and wasn't necessarily fulfilling all of his responsibilities. Any one of those things by itself probably wasn't enough to push him out the door, but the collection of all of those things really kind of turned the team against him, and it made things counterproductive, and that's when she realized she had to let him go. So she called him in, she sat down with him, she started talking through all of the things, right? The laundry list of, well, you're not great at this, your attitude's not great, people don't like this, and you're not blah, 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 on and on and on. And when she got done telling him all those things, he just looked at her and said, why haven't you told me this before? Right? And she says that's kind of when she realized that she had failed him as a leader, that for whatever reason, she didn't ever address any of those things. And, you know, in the world of education, that's not really how we do it. And she goes into, obviously that's not the way you should do it in any field, but she goes into a few ways in that book to help have those conversations, and that idea of caring deeply, right? That I care about you as a person. I care about you as a professional. I care about you enough to tell you the truth so that I don't ever have to experience, why didn't you tell me, right? So she talks about that. And the challenging directly piece, this is really, really important. I'm going to deliver a direct message. I'm not going to soften it. I'm not going to sneak it into a positivity sandwich. And people think that that's a really good way to do it. But what happens when you're, hey, you know, you did a great job with this, but this thing's not very good, but you're awesome at, all they heard was you're awesome at, right? Or you sent very mixed signals and the message gets lost. The message, that the most important message of this is the thing that we need to fix, whether it's improving instruction or professional communication or whatever, we need to address that issue. The positive and the praise, that should be coming as we go on a day-to-day basis, right? As I'm in your classroom, I can leave you a message about, here, this is the awesome thing that I saw, or when you're in my office for your summative or whenever, we can have those conversations. But those difficult, direct conversations, and one of the things that she recommends, and I really like to do this, I try to do this, is if I've got to deliver bad news or if I've got to give you some difficult feedback, I actually go to your classroom and deliver that message. It's a more comfortable space.
On their turf.
It's on their turf. It's a more comfortable space for the teacher. And I'm visiting them. I'm a guest in their domain. Yeah. And it's a lot better to do it that way, right? That way when they come to your office, it's positive, right? Yeah. Unless we're getting to a place where bigger conversations need to happen, but that's probably for another show. So care deeply, challenge directly. I think it's huge in how to have these conversations more effectively.
And the message is so different than what you hear normally. You talked about, you know, the positive sandwich, you know, that we've all come accustomed to and heard. I've even been trained on how to do that right. But I really like the part where you just can't get the mixed signals. So it's really different, and it's really great. Second tip is to be a good listener. Stands to reason, right? It's a skill too. And one of the things that I think to be a good listener, the biggest thing to be a good listener is asking great questions. Yep. This is not something that's just ingrained in the leader. And I really think that this is a skill that can be learned. There's some great podcasts out there that do a great job. Sure. Michael Gervais does a great job. Joe Ferraro does a great job. Cal Fussman does a great job. All those guys in the podcast, if you're listening to those guys, you're learning about questioning. The other thing is to genuinely seek to understand the situation at hand. There's two types of situations that I really want to talk about. There's the specific situation, and then there's habitual, right? Yeah. Two different situations, two different ways to address the person that you're trying to have those difficult conversations with. When you're talking about specifics or a poignant time that there's been something that's happened, make sure that you're looking at the facts. You don't want to jump to conclusions too fast. Gather information, do a good job interviewing all the people that are involved, and really get and come down to the truth of it all. There's always two sides to every situation, right?
There's nothing worse than being Barney Fife. Right? If you're not familiar, but it's I got him. I got him. There's nothing worse than being Barney Fife and getting all, because we've both worked for people like that.
Sure.
That they see something and they don't take the time to really do their due diligence. They just get all fired up about, I gotta go handle this right now. It's like, let's just take a little time, get all the facts, hear them out before you start. I've got to fix you, or I've got to fix this. Like that's not a good way to approach business.
And I'd add to this too is make sure that you give the teacher the opportunity to fix that specific situation.
Oh, sure.
Right. Give them a chance to right the wrong if there is a wrong that's been done. The other one we're talking about is habitual, right? So this is something that happens over time. You've seen it fester. You've seen it happen over and over and over, like being late to something or even not showing up for your duty. How terrible is that? The message that sends to other people when you don't deal with those habitual issues is that you really don't care.
Yeah.
You're really not going to make sure that everyone's on board with the things that you're talking about, and it really diminishes yourself as a leader. Those habitual situations don't go away, but it is absolutely worth it to save a great teacher who you need on your campus. The third tip is to make the solution collaborative. The teacher absolutely needs to be involved with the solution. It's a step you cannot miss when dealing with these tough situations.
They've got to own it.
They do.
Yeah.
They really do. You do not have to come up with the answer here.
Yeah.
And asking great questions, again, like we've talked about before, are big.
Yeah.
Guide them into the situation, guide them to solution. You don't have to see exactly eye to eye here. You don't have to be the sage on the stage, right, to fix their problem, but you got to get them going the right direction.
Sometimes you just have to help them see it.
Sure.
Right? Like they may not know it's an issue until you bring it to light. And as soon as they know it, like, oh my goodness, and they'll start coming up with all the ideas for how to solve it themselves. And they just needed us to help them see
Present it.
Yeah.
Sure. The other thing I'd say is, are you willing to give a little to win the battle in the end, right? Don't make it a huge battle royale right here, right now. Give them an opportunity to fix the situation, like we said before. Give them an opportunity to be a part of the solution, and get them closer to what you want. That's what you want. You want progress. You don't want to win the war today.
Our last tip for the day, and it's specific to instruction. When you're giving feedback on instruction, it needs to be specific, and it needs to be differentiated to the needs of that teacher. Whether the feedback is good or bad, it needs to be specific, and it needs to be differentiated to that teacher's needs. So for example, if you're working with a novice teacher, a brand new teacher, they just got done with their student teaching and they're all fired up, and here they are in a real job and something goes wrong in their classroom. Normally, we'll go into a situation, and like Brett was talking about just a minute ago, asking questions, right? Trying to help them get to what went wrong. But sometimes with a novice teacher, just like you, the new administrator in your role, they don't know what they don't know, right? So you may ask all the guiding questions in the book, and they're just looking at you, pardon me for my like Oklahoma upbringing right here, but they're just looking at you like a cow staring at a new gate, right? Like they have no idea where you're trying to go because they don't know what they don't know, right? So,
and it's not even so much as just a new teacher. It could be just a new teacher to your building.
Absolutely. They don't know how we do things.
Culture.
Yeah. So sometimes with a novice teacher, you've got to be much more direct, right? In that, hey, I saw this. What do you think about, here are a couple options or ways that I've seen other people work through this. Which one of those do you think might work best for you? Rather than, hey, I saw this. How do you think we could fix it? Because they just may not know, right? And you've got to feel that out as you're having your conversation. Versus, say, a master teacher that's excellent at their craft. What they don't need you to do is just to say, man, that lesson was awesome. Appreciate you. Have a good day. Because they know it is, right? Master teachers know how good they are because they know the work that they put in and they've been doing it over time. What that master teacher needs to hear from you is, hey, you know what? This is the one thing I saw today that really brought that whole thing together for your kids. Thank you so much for putting the work in to that little detail that most people would have missed, because that's the kind of feedback that's going to reward that master teacher, because they're going to realize, man, he really paid attention to what was going on in my class there. She really understands the work that I put into making this experience for my students. And there are levels in between there, right?
Sure.
You know, between that novice teacher and that master teacher, there are all kinds of levels in between. So we've got to make sure that we're bringing the right feedback at the right time. So I just think that that's super huge. And unfortunately, I didn't learn that. Probably until maybe my third year of being an assistant principal. I didn't learn that because I would just go to, well, the rubric says this, and this is what I saw. And I would just kind of approach every one of those conversations the same way. But I had a really, really good training in my third year that really talked about the differentiation of feedback. And it makes a lot of sense. I just had never really thought about it before.
Yeah, it's really great. Well, folks, that's the time we have with you today. We hope you'll hit the like. We hope you'll subscribe, join our list, be a part of our tribe. Thanks so much for watching.
See you next time.